Hello and welcome to the Cash News Podcast, your go-to source for informative conversations about all things cash and currency. From cash security and payments technology to the cash supply chain, we're here to share insights on the issues shaping the world of cash today. Join your hosts, Tom Meehan, Shaun Ferrari, and Brad Moody, as they dive into the latest trends, strategies, and technology. This is the Cash News Podcast. Now, here's Tom, Shaun, and Brad.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Cash News Podcast. It's 2025, and we're committed to doing a lot of fun things in 2025. But we have our new co-host here with us. I think we've mentioned this a few times. He's been on a couple times, Brad Moody, and then, as always, the infamous Shaun Ferrari.
Hello, everybody.
Howdy, everybody.
Welcome to where are we? 2025? Is that what it is? 2025. We're halfway through the first part of the year, maybe a quarter into the year for those that want to do math. Halfway into the half part of the year, but it's good to talk to everybody. As Tom said, we're looking to really do some more of this. We know it's been a little quiet from us lately, but it's been a lot of changes going on this first part of the year. I think with Brad on board now, we've got a good plan to at least have a couple of us talking to you more often.
Yeah, let's talk. So there's a lot of changes, right? So there's changes. Why don't we start with your changes, Shaun? What have you been up to?
Sure, yeah. So on the currency research side, it was a busy first part of the year. From an organizational standpoint, some of the bigger news is Jens and myself did a management buyout of the company from the former owner, Rick Haycock. So we're both, Jens is the majority owner, I'm a minority owner, but we're kind of sharing ownership now, and we're excited about it. We're really looking forward to continuing what we've been doing really for the past couple of years in terms of trying to innovate on some things we're doing, come up with some different ideas, look at what's going on in the cash and payments market, and really kind of right size what it is we're doing to fit the evolving market. So we're excited about that. I think the team behind us, we've got one of the best teams out there in terms of the payments and cash event space. I think they're super excited and really engaged and getting going this year. So it's been a busy first part.
Congratulations.
Stuff coming up. No, thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, congratulations. It's awesome.
Pretty awesome. That's great.
What else is awesome? Brad Moody's here.
Yeah,
that's pretty
great.
Cool.
So it's been a little bit over 3 months, drinking from a fire hose, but it's still learning all the great things we do over here. Great. I tell you, the culture is fantastic. The people I work with are innovative, and it's really a great place to work. And I appreciate all the opportunities that it presents itself, and starting to really see some positive impact towards some customers and the value add and everything else that happens within the products. So couldn't be more happy, and got some good leadership and some good growth potential here to help everybody else. So it's exactly where I need to be at this time.
That's super awesome. Exciting. Well, so congratulations to you as well, and to Tom for having you sitting there next to him.
Yeah, it's exciting, and I think so it's important, right? Like, I'm going to throw the plug out here. The way Brad and I met might have been at Currency Research.
Yep,
it absolutely no, it was. That's how we met, and I think when you think of events, and there's so many things to choose, Currency Research has been one that's really drove the industry, and I think some of the best relationships and partnerships that I've formed have been there. So, and as someone that 8 years ago joined from outside of the industry, really, it was the place that I went to. I don't know, I've done probably, I don't know how many shows, maybe 15, 16 different events, and really every time got something out of it. And the networking potential, both personally and professionally, has been phenomenal. So kudos to you and your group, Shaun, for it, because Mr. Moody would not be sitting next to me, I don't think, if we met there.
That's true.
To be, right?
No, it's a matter of fact.
Yeah. It is interesting, and the more and more we kind of get into some different payments things, digital currency things, as well as the cash and coin stuff that we of course always do and support, it is really a tight group of folks, and it's the big extended family that kind of is in this area, and people might change roles or change companies or what have you, but generally kind of bounce around within the cash or payment sphere. And it's true, even on the payment side. We're newer in that space, right? We kind of started our first central bank payments conference 9 years ago now. But over that 9 years, now we're starting to see kind of that similar thing where it's like, okay, yeah, now it's that constant group of folks, and of course there's some new blood that comes in, but it's still a very kind of loyal and familial kind of atmosphere that develops, which is nice. So
Great.
glad we can bring people together, and it all kind of works out. So it's good.
Yeah, and probably because we haven't done this in a while, it probably makes sense to say how, Shaun, you and I kind of got this started, because I was just recently on a call with someone who said, "Tell me about the Cash News podcast." They saw it on LinkedIn, and the first thing is the Cash News podcast is not just about cash. We love that that we're focused heavily on cash, but it's really about all things payments, both digital and physical. And the other thing that came up is literally the question was like, well, what caused you to start? And I said, well, it was during COVID. And I said, we were talking about how we weren't communicated, and we were just trying to find another platform to deliver information. And that was really what it was. And if you are a listener and you're interested in coming on, we have kind of an open rule. We don't turn anybody down. We really love.
Sometimes you should.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. And we were discussing this offline prior. Not that we'll get into specifics, but we've never edited a single episode. We did not air one based on some things that occurred, but that wasn't a bad thing. It's just we chose to save that for the archives. One day we'll probably put it out there. But we pride ourselves on this isn't scripted. We really want to have open dialect and open conversation, and we don't mask words. I think actually I remember this very well. I think we had Brad on. The first time we were talking about crypto, and the next time the crypto market crashed like dramatically, and some people might have sent me some notes going like, "Hey, that's not helpful to talk about it." And I said, "Well, that's what we do. Talk about what's going on."
Yeah, we were at in one of the first live broadcasts we did at the right after COVID at our banknote conference in DC, and we had a digital currency conference along with it, and I believe Tom and I got heckled, not just by Brad, but by somebody else at that event as well. As we were filming, somebody walked by from the crypto side and was like, "Why are you talking about cash? What are you guys doing?"
I believe I'll leave some of it out because some of it would be not appropriate. I don't know who the individual was, but he said, "Do you know your podcast name is stupid?" Like, that's what he said, and I said, "Huh?" And it was an interesting group, but it was actually fun because it was the contrast of you had folks that were digital, and some could have even been anti-cash, and kind of that's what we want. We want to have that conversation, and we do talk about digital payments, digital currency. They are different. Let me just clarify quite a bit, and because we know that it's part of the business, and we're not shy about that. Consumer trends are changing, and the way people use cash is changing. We're also not shy about some of the things that occur when we think that we can get to a cashless society. There's plenty, and I think the most recent is Sweden, right? Isn't that the one that now is getting the most attention about reversing and some of the things that occurred? But we've also, Shaun and I, and actually Brad too, we've been lucky that in the few years that we've done the podcast, Swift has gone down throughout North America multiple times. AT&T had a major outage that, so there were actual real use cases of things that we talk about that were, when you look back, weren't catastrophic unless you were a business. Swift going down for 12 hours in Canada means it was actually something that completely changed and opened the eyes to folks of going like, how does that happen? And then we still talk about, I don't know what we'll talk about today, but I think it's topic is check fraud is higher today than it's ever been. And people are like, no one uses checks. I'm like, you're not actually right. A lot of people use checks, and so there's all these things. It's
funny as you talk about that, of things going on and kind of how the world evolves around payments. It was I just sent an agenda from. So we're getting ready for our currency conference in Bangkok coming up at the end of May. If anybody's interested, currencyresearch.com, Bangkok, end of May, currency conference. But
Done on a t-shirt.
Yeah.
but not t-shirt, yeah. But I was looking, somebody from the Fed who's coming and doing one of our keynotes asked me if I had an agenda from the 2007 event, which we also did in Bangkok. That was the last time we were in Bangkok. So it's, almost 20 years later. And we're back 18 years later, right? We're back. So they were trying to get a sense of, for some remarks they're making, what's changed. So I went through the agenda, and interestingly, I put together just a quick list of some of the highlights that were on the agenda. So in 2007 in Bangkok, the topics were recovering from a recent natural disaster.
Wow.
They had a tsunami then, and just had an earthquake now. Cash and alternative payments. Will cash continue to exist? The changing cash cycle, how technology is advancing the cash cycle. New features and on notes and new security features, those sorts of things. How processing equipment and sensors are changing. Those were the big themes. You could pretty much lift those themes and drop them into an agenda 18 years later. It's very similar, right? Now the things within those themes obviously are different. The same, we're not talking about the same technology on how the cash cycle is changing. There's been some new advances there. We're not talking about the same security features and substrates. But the question around cash and alternative payments, now were we talking about CBDCs and stable coins then? No. But we were definitely talking about electronic payments and the threat that those posed to cash. So I mean, it's very interesting. Just kind of how the similar themes, right? So I don't know where I was going with that, but it seemed to
No,
flow from
I
what we
think
were talking about.
I think it's because things of this size don't change overnight. They take decades and sometimes centuries to change. We I don't know where we were. You were with us for sure, and someone was talking about CDBCs and how quickly you can set it up, and then at the same time they were talking about the bricks, and I'm like, you can't. This is not. There's no way to do any of this quickly. Technology is advanced, but the learning curve for people, and I think we talked about all these things together, but the theme here is that real-time payments is not new. We talk about this all the time. It's the technology enables it differently. So yeah, I don't know that we'll see massive changes. I think in the industry, I do think consumer behavior is changing.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and then look at the fraud aspect of it as well, right? So that'll soon be discovered, and the bad actors are always two steps ahead, and it's going to happen. It's happened already, and then you look at consumer behavior. What does that revert to? What they're comfortable with, and there you go. There's cash back. So
yeah. It is interesting just on that, like the different payment alternatives. I think probably for several years now on this podcast, I have mentioned that I do Girl Scout cookie booths, and that's my informal sampling of how people are paying these days in this area anyway. And my report for this year and how that compares to last year was in the prior years, it's still a lot of cash. It's Girl Scouts cookie booth, right? Still a lot of cash. People still have their $6 now, which makes change a whole separate issue, which I think they should reevaluate. But nonetheless, $6 a box, a lot of cash. But whereas last year, people were more credit card for electronic payments, and giving me their credit card and letting me type in all of their information into my iPhone to submit a credit card payment, which is probably about the least secure thing you could do. But nonetheless, because now you just pull it up. Oh, look, there's that person. Yeah. Anyway, instead now nobody did credit card payments, and it was all, do you do Apple Pay? Do you do Zelle? Do you do Venmo? So there was a noticeable shift this year in my unscientific study of moving down that kind of payments path, away from cards, more to the mobile wallet type.
So you open the door of we don't plan, right? Like we literally don't plan these conversations out. So Zelle no longer exists, right? They sunsetted the service last week, right? Was it last week? Yeah, it was either this week or last week.
Yeah.
And so perfect, like, it was interesting because there was a podcast that we talked about where people were saying, Zelle was creating fraud, and I'm like, no, people were creating fraud. Right. Yeah, it was a social engineer. Like Zelle wasn't doing anything. As a matter of fact, what would you classify Zelle as, my friend? Both of you, what do you classify it as? Because they're not a bank. They're not a.
Oh, I was going to say a messaging system, but
right.
They're transmission service.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not real time. Yeah. Really.
Not really. It's not. It gives the appearance of real time.
Yeah. It's not the same as Venmo or PayPal. It was kind of. It's not. It was kind of its own piece.
It was a consortium, right? I mean, it was a consortium of banks that.
Well, it's like Plaid now, right? So.
Yeah. I think it was interesting just because you mentioned Zelle, and I never used Zelle personally, not because I was anti-Zelle. I just never used it. I use Venmo. I actually tried Cash App because I was doing an experiment just to see, but I think my wife uses Venmo all the time, to the point where, like, at school, I think that's like the preferred method to donate for like the PFA, like, is like Venmo. Like, I think they actually are like, you need to write a check or Venmo. They can't do anything else. So at least where I live, I'm always worried about like tax stuff, because she'll be the mom that collects. I'm like, hey, make sure like you keep all this stuff, because you just collected all this money for the school, and it's not, it's going into a Venmo account, and we're basically, she's the collection pot a lot of times for these things. So, and it's a very interesting piece. I will tell you that personally, I think because of, I found that I'm going more to Apple Pay and contactless payment than I've ever before, and it's just because it's easy. I leave my wallet, because at the airport I use Clear, right? I don't even take my wallet out of my bag anymore. I still usually have cash with me, just because I, always have a little bit of cash with me, usually to tip. That's usually why, or in case there's an emergency. But I found myself personally going to contactless more than I've ever gone, and it's mainly because I don't want to carry my wallet.
Well, I'd say real quick, kind of cash story, right? It happened this past weekend. I'm up helping a friend work on. He just bought an old cabin, right? Needs some help. We went up there to work in way upstate New York, like an hour north of Binghamton.
Binghamton.
Yeah, Binghamton. In the middle of nowhere, right? No heat in the house. So the chimney guy comes over, and he looks and he says, "Yep, I can get that going. $400, and I only take cash." We're like, cash? Well, why not anything else? He goes, nearest bank is 45 minutes away from here, and there's one ATM. So guess what? I had to drive an hour and a half round trip to go get the money to pay this guy, so there was heat in the house.
Yeah.
Just that it's, because that's the alternative there. There is no alternative.
And I think that's one of the things that I live 20 minutes outside New York City. We live in major, even if we're away from things, we live in areas where that doesn't exist, but the country is a big country.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of places that really do exist. One thing I'm also seeing a trend, and I think we talked about this last time, I don't know if you're seeing it, but like in anywhere I go to eat now, there's a credit card and a cash price, which I
haven't seen that yet.
Yeah. Anywhere I go to eat, and they're adding 3 to 4% and saying it's lower for cash. Even at what I would say very upscale restaurants, not where I wouldn't even think to see it. It's funny because my wife will be like, if we're going to eat, we're going to get cash because I'm not paying extra money to use a credit card, and if you're going out, with two families, it's hard to, it's expensive. It's not a couple bucks. You're going to spend $300-$400, with kids and two families. And she said, I'm not giving them an extra, $20 because we can just bring cash. So that I've seen it at a much greater rate than I've ever seen.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think that's where a lot of the new fintech is going to make payment experiences like that. I think fintechs are finally, I think, making some inroads with the banks and being able to upgrade some apps where you have different abilities, whether it's Venmo, so you can avoid paying a credit card fee, or whether it's through the credit card interface itself, but allowing like the splitting of payments or things that you would normally do with cash, you can do relatively seamlessly inside your app now. So I think they're starting to bring those things around so you can do that sort of thing. And just I was chatting with somebody a couple of weeks ago, and the interesting piece was the confusion around all the different ways to make payments and all the different channels is still pervasive, not just for consumers, but also for businesses of like, oh, hey, one of the business models out there is, look, I can save you X% by just helping you streamline or telling you what's available on your payment platform.
Yeah,
right.
And educate you on that. And so there's a lot of education there. And even on the Zelle thing we were just talking about, right? It's like, yeah, the Zelle app shut down, but I can still Zelle people between banks, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
like,
Yep.
so the service exists, and
Yep.
you just have to sign up for it and use it through your bank. You just can't do it through the Zelle app. But again, how do you communicate that effectively to the public is
Yeah, and I think one of the things I consistently talk about, and I think it's actually something we should try to get some guests on to talk about is, and I think we talked about this the last time we were together as a group, is there's still a lot of confusion on digital payment, contactless payment, cryptocurrency, stablecoin, and it for a lot of folks that we talk about, even folks in the industry, it starts to become one thing. And that creates consumer conflict or friction because someone, like I was at an event recently that was smaller, 60 to 70 person event, and there was conversation about, the need to pay with Bitcoin and that, how many Bitcoin ATMs there were. And I'm like, well, that's the need to pay with Bitcoin versus you're talking about two different things. And then I was like, well, what I mean is to be able to convert Bitcoin to cash. So that's different than pay with Bitcoin. And then he was like, well, who pays with Bitcoin? I said, well, that was the question.
You
Yeah.
accept it, right?
that was what it is. And then I'm thinking then we started to get down the rabbit hole of, did you know that PayPal lets you pay with Bitcoin? And I'm going, and then the conversation is, no, I don't know that. And then I looked and I'm like, no, PayPal has an option to buy Bitcoin and then transfer it in. So like there's all these nuances that cause confusion. And if it's confusing for people in the industry, it's the consumer version. I mean, you and I were in Chicago, I think it was SCTA, talking about digital payments, and we were up there talking about it, and there was a lot of the questions were like, well, that's not the same thing.
Right.
Like, it's a completely different, you're asking, it's a good question, but it's not about the payment processing, it's the type of payment. And I think,
it just makes me wonder because, just think if you accept payment by Bitcoin, then does that mean that you should also have variable pricing based on the value of the Bitcoin? Look at yesterday.
Well,
right?
I mean, you would have to. I mean, if you, that's the exposure. That's your risk exposure, right?
Right.
I mean, yeah, you're
drastic ups and downs.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And yesterday was an interesting day.
Yeah.
There were there were drastic up and downs in treasury bills and bonds yesterday.
Well, so that's what we're getting into the next part. That's what I want to talk about. So I'm not sure, our producer Francesca is listening. I'm not sure when this is going to get published. I think it's going to get published really quick though. And we're right now when we're taping this, what's today, the 9th or the 10th? The 10th. It's April 10th. So this week is probably a class of that you could teach about economic and what economic levers actually exist and how certain things can affect not just the U.S. economy but the global economy. And so this was the week of tariffs went into place, and April 9th was the night, and I traveled this week, which made it more complex because I had a million phone calls of what are we going to do? And my answer was like, well, we don't know. How do you know what to do if you don't know what's happening? And coming from my standpoint, if anybody that knows me is that's not how I like to operate. So I'm going like, I got 14 contingency plans, and none of them could be right or wrong. And then the volatility in the market was wild.
Problem is that they were both right and wrong.
Yes, exactly.
At the same time.
I mean, I think that's you're talking about what's the class that comes out of this week, and I don't know. Honestly, it's still hard to process everything, but like to me, it all comes back down to the uncertainty piece. It's just like, because as you just said, it's like if you know it's going to be a certain way, you might not like it, but you can at least plan for it. Yep. But when you don't know, you can't plan for anything. You're just like, I don't.
So you triggered my conspiracy theory. That I'm going to say it.
Yeah, here we go.
We
need another banner. We have our breaking news banner. Right? We need a conspiracy theory banner.
There is a disclaimer. We'll say the disclaimer at the end because Brad's on now and we have to.
I'm not very smart, but I'm incredibly good looking. Right? I've always said that. So let's just pretend I were smart. And if I know that in a really bad and volatile economy, what does gold do, right? As S&P goes down, gold goes way up, right? It's an inverse relationship there's a price fixed equilibrium point that will never meet at the true value of $1, right? Because gold is right now trading around $3,000 an ounce, a troy ounce, historic highs. So let's just pretend that if I knew I had enough influence to say something that would damage the global economy, right? I already know that the gold is going to shoot up. So let's just say right before that happens, I trade everything into gold, right? I say some things, I don't know, the number 125 comes to mind, right? Now, all of a sudden, gold's going up. I sold my shares. I could care less what the stock does, right? And then I could inversely say at the same time at rock bottom lows where it drops, thousands and thousands of dollars, let's go ahead and sell that gold back into futures and then come out and say something to change, give a little bit of hope, a little bit of glimmer that all the people that are incentivized to make those changes, Wall Street, can now do that. And now I've just made trillions of dollars.
Yeah. So
off of Bitcoin. No, last part was a joke.
So I'm not going to get into conspiracy theory because here's my philosophy on a lot of this is, and this is not political in nature. And, I have a good friend who will probably listen to the podcast who's a high-level executive at a company that has nothing to do with us. And we were chatting pretty openly about this. And, he's a very smart man, like very, very intelligent. And I've had this conversation, Shaun, I've had this conversation multiple times. A lot of what we base it on is what the 30s, 40s, and 50s, what we did for many, many years. We really haven't adjusted the way we looked. And I remember this vividly, I don't know where Shaun and I was. People were talking about interest rates and me going money's not supposed to be free.
Right.
This is going to destroy us. Money's not supposed to be free. This doesn't work. And then during the pandemic, same example, we're comparing to the Spanish flu. I'm how do you compare the Spanish flu? Technology is not the same. Global travel is not the same. The economic levers aren't the same. Nothing is the same. So with this piece, I was on a plane and I'm listening to CNBC and they're like, this is exactly what we did in 1940. And I'm like, why is anybody comparing 2025 to 1940? We are not, that nothing is the same.
Because they sold to gold and they wanted to go lower.
Yes. But my whole piece here is I think that, and we are a manufacturer. My full-time job, we manufacture, which means that all of these things directly affect what we do. So we have to pay attention to them. And we, and this is not, this is going to come to be a plug. It's not a plug, but at Control Tech, we've always built around resiliency. We've always been able to manufacture in multiple places, multiple continents, and that's based on our customer demand, not based on COVID, not based on this. And so when this happened, we had contingencies in every place we could, but the uncertainty, to your point earlier, is what drives, okay, well, I have multiple options, but if I don't know what happens, it creates uncertainty. I think we were positioned really well from a business perspective because we had the levers that other people couldn't pull. I think some of the folks I talk to in businesses that we partner with were in a position as well. But at the end of the day, I do believe that some of the things that occurred are adjustments that we never fixed from
I agree.
50 years ago. And automotive is my favorite example. We all travel globally. A lot of people don't. When you go to other countries, it's remarkable how in the US there is Korean, Japanese, German cars. But if you go to Germany, US car is a luxury. You won't find it. If you go to Japan, you won't find it. Because of how one-sided tariffs were. So there's certain things that probably should have happened over time, not at once. But the way in which they happened creates uncertainty. And I'll turn it over to you two to kind of wrap up. Is it goes back to Shaun and I, and you were part of this too. I don't know where we were talking about this, the bank run and going bank run. Uncertainty is what causes banks to fail, not bank, because the way banks work is they're using your money to make more money. That's how they work. And it's the uncertainty is what drives everything. And I do think that we're in for a very interesting next 90 days because there's still uncertainty. Do I think that humans are resilient? Absolutely. Do I think we'll figure it out? Absolutely. If you didn't learn anything from COVID, you learned that the end of the world turned into economies growing and, things happening that, again, if you went with the history books, population would be lower, all these things would happen. But the reality was it the most challenging time in modern history? Yeah, but we also came out on top as a global civilization, not as just certain countries. And you know what? I think this is one of those moments where there's an adjustment, regardless of your political views, regardless of everything. This is another adjustment. I wish it didn't all happen in like a 10-year period so that we could actually get one adjustment done to the other. But I still every day people go I'm just waiting for interest rates to go to 2%. And I'm like, I hope they don't ever go to 2%.
They couldn't go.
Because the cycle will never get better. And it's like housing market, when it does, I'm going to buy another house. And I'm like, I would buy a house now. If you're going to buy another house, and you can do it now, because that's not the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah, but we don't want the rates of in the 70s of 10 to 15%.
No.
But at the same time, worse than inflation in any market, stagflation, right? And deflation. So when you have those things pop up and they start becoming, now the dollar's weaker, other currencies are more valuable, but there's nothing to buy from there. Then what, the American consumer, what they do, they become an inflationary market's not a bad thing.
No.
But the growth rate has got to be managed, and that's what the Fed's for, right? That's when the 5-year swap rate starts increasing and the value of money becomes more valuable in a deposit, form at a bank instead of in float, then I think that we're going to see some real positive things. That's an indicator of positive economy. So hopefully that's next.
So Shaun, here's the question, man.
Yeah. So
what's going on? You're the economist here. What's going on? Tell me about the Treasury bonds. Tell me about the yield. What's going on?
Well, I was actually going to take it back to the cash point, honestly, rather than the economic point. I was just going to say,
politician.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say we've always said years and years, forever, it's economic and political instability that drives a lot of spikes and increase in cash demand. So I'm going to be very interested. I don't know what the numbers are yet. Everything kind of just happened this past week and a lot of uncertainty. And I would be curious, though, to see kind of over this past month, this past couple weeks, what currency growth actually comes out at. Because the logical part of me, the just consumer part of me says, why would it matter? But having seen what I've seen, every time something like this happens, it drives cash growth. People flock back to cash. You use gold, so same sort of idea. Go to something stable. Maybe this time they went to more gold because that.
Well, gold.
Because this was getting to the point. Yeah, I mean, this was getting to the point where you started to even question the strength of currency. It was getting that bad there. So I could see people maybe flocking more towards gold than currency in this case, but still, I think cash was still seen as a safe haven to some extent. But I think the other difference piece here is that we usually see it go internationally, and people hold U.S. currency internationally. Now, the question will be, do we still see that? Did that still happen? Will that still happen? Or would they rather grab a euro or something else where there might be a little less political turmoil? I don't know. I think there are things that are potentially happening that question some of the underlying things. Like we're hearing it even from the conference standpoint. We're doing some larger conferences here next year, and some of the international audience is like, I don't know if I want to go. Like I don't know if I want to go. Just not to just to the U.S. in general. And it's like, all right, fair enough. So I don't know. So when you're talking about holding currency, do people kind of put that aside and say, yeah, no, I'm still going to hold the U.S. dollar, or is there some sort of, well, we don't really, whether it's a questioning of the underlying stability or it's a protest, if you will. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah.
I'd be curious based off of the erratic, not decisions, but the erratic emotions of it. I'm curious if it'll happen sooner or later.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think right now this week, I think you gotta wait. We gotta wait a few days, if not a week, for things to tail a little bit, because there's still the uncertainty, and the stock market isn't the best indicator, because if you look at it, it's emotional, right? Like it's a very emotionally driven, but so is the whole economic system. So it is important to know. But I'll touch on something, because you hit on. I was at a conference in Canada with some clients that I would say are friends at this point, and they said, like, we can't travel to the U.S. We were banned to travel to the U.S. And he said, I think it's the wrong move. He said, I think this just further exasperates it. But I talked to a few of them, and they all said that they were told no travel to the U.S. And then one of them, doesn't matter what they do, said that we were also told to not purchase from U.S. companies until this and these are big corporations. So I think there is some of that going on. I personally, this is my opinion, I feel like that people should not make decisions based on what they're told to do. They should make decisions based on what they think is right and wrong, because big government doesn't always represent the population's feelings. And like with something like this, I also think this is more complex than most people realize. Like the levers with tariffs, and when you think about Treasury, when you think about all the things that were involved here, again, that's why I hate the history books. Don't compare to what happened in 1940, because it's not the same. And then we'll throw the monkey wrench in, which I think we should talk about the next time, is we forget that our computing power and our ability to use technology today is so far more advanced than before, that some of these decisions are being made by machines that didn't exist before. Like the math, it's just there's algorithms in AI that is doing things that even 3 years ago didn't exist. So I am always like with the especially with the crypto market, I'm like, there's just so many things that influence it today. But the dollar, I could be wrong, but I read that I don't know what Iran uses for currency, that it was almost like it immediately the value went down. So the impact globally is occurring, and I don't think it's fizzled out. I think we still have the uncertainty piece. I think that this is I don't think that this is a new thing. I think this is a thing that we just have to figure out how to adjust. And I think that tariffs correctly applied even out some things. That's my personal opinion. That's my business opinion. I think that there needs to be some balance in trade. There also needs to be an understanding of our GDP versus someone else's GDP, and what the impact is on us versus them. But that's why I'm not a politician or in those positions. I manufacture the best bags in the world and the best systems for. That's what I do. But I feel like we get between the three of us, we get more exposure to other people than most people do. Like, we're talking to big banks, we're talking to retailers, we're talking to manufacturers, you're talking to people who off the record will say things. And I'll leave you with this. I'm curious as well to the dollar move. I'm also curious to the note. I believe that we'll continue to see a larger denomination bill held, because I go back to my food point. I cannot go to dinner with my family without spending more than $100. There's no way. There's no way to do it anymore if it's a regular restaurant. And by the way, my daughter said, we went to McDonald's. It was 17, like $18 a person. So like to eat fast food. So I do think the drive in the diary study, to me, it seems very logical that we're going to see a higher note usage because it's very hard to spend money at a lower denomination. If your preferred method is cash, you're not going to dinner with a family of 4 or 5 for less than 150. It just doesn't happen.
Especially where you live in proximity to New York City.
Yeah. It just doesn't work. And I'm sure you have a similar experience that, you're not getting a meal for a child for $8 to $10. It doesn't work. You're more than double that. And my favorite indicator of that is a 12 pack of soda is $9. A bag of chips is $7. That wasn't that way before.
No.
And people are still buying them.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, and furthering that, I can't go to the grocery store and just get a couple items for less than $50, maybe 30 if I'm lucky.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's just like the quick, pick up these couple things, shopping trips.
Yeah, I'd say I'm really. It's probably a good time for everything to get started looking at this stuff. But consumer spending is where I really am nervous about. It's not like, hey, it's Black Friday and that's the measurement for the year at this point. Now it's much different from, are people going to now say, you know what, I'm not going to go take that trip, which is feeding other, it's spring break for us next week, and so I'm not going to take that trip anymore to go to that little town that depends on the spring breakers. And, I think there's the downstream effect of that is really going to be tragic. And as Tom has said on our calls, the tariff calls, that this impact is actually likely going to, hope you don't mind me saying it.
I don't know. It depends what you say.
About in other countries, it actually killing populations, right? Of not having enough food to do this because of tariffs and the inability to do trade. And this is, much more, this is a bigger thing to worry about. But consumer spending is going to be a big part that's going to feed the world when you look at it from that perspective.
Yeah. It's a lot to sort through.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack in it. And I think by the next time we talk, we might have a whole different philosophy here. Like, I'm a believer of you can't panic buy, you can't panic out. You have to ride the wave. So I think we're seeing that. I also know factually that when you think of the Magnificent Seven, they lost $1 trillion.
Yeah.
Well, they just came back $1 trillion in a day, and again,
$3 trillion.
Yeah, when you look
gold.
The gold. Yeah, they've got it. But when you look at that, also like this again, I'm going to keep beating this up. Is there were today? What are there? There are multiple companies worth more than $1 trillion that didn't exist.
Yeah,
it didn't exist even a few years ago.
Yeah.
So, and what Apple has more cash than all but I thought 4 countries in the world or something like that. So think about that. Think about well, they lost $1 trillion. Yeah, okay, well,
economies of scale.
It's economy to scale. It's the same as comparing the U.S. to another country and saying it needs to be even what California has. What's California's GDP in the world? I can't remember now. 6 or something. I can't remember now.
It's around 5, 6. Yeah.
So
it was 6.
Yeah. So, but when I talk to European, I was on the phone with a partner, a good friend of mine in Denmark, and I'm like, no. You can't compare 50 states to one country that in your world is big because Canada's population is smaller than multiple states. Right, like not one, and geographically they're massive, but it's there's a lot of things in the mix here. And with manufacturing, I knock on wood that from a control tech standpoint that we are probably a little bit more conservative, which puts us in a little bit safetier net. And the reality is that that's great. But we don't control the whims of consumer purchasing, and I think that consumers are nervous. I also think that. I want to be cautious how I say this. I don't think a lot of consumers pay much more than the headline. I don't think people actually read the fine print and look into it. And the only reason I say that is because when you get into the weeds of things, if you took the time really to look at it, there are two sides to every story, and usually it's the headline that drives what people hear. We are in a different generation even than when we started the podcast. Like, I don't know if I'm not sure of this, but I don't even know if TikTok was around when we started the podcast. I'm gonna have to check now. But if they were, they didn't have the penetration that they do today. So, I speak about this. You probably, I've actually probably done it for you guys. Is like, TikTok, there was a video that, 10 million people saw in 93 seconds that was incorrect. And you've got to assume that influenced them. And you're going like, holy moly, like 91 accounts spread a video to 10 million people.
Just think about the grapevine effect.
In time that wouldn't be possible before, and spread an incorrect narrative. So 10 million people, if only 100,000 of them believe it and make a decision on that's massive. And the reality is, we know that that's not the case. Yeah. And it's adults getting their news from social media. And this isn't a shot at anybody because everybody's busy. It's our attention spans are different, all of this stuff. I mean, I was on the plane yesterday reading the headlines, and it was hard for me to pay attention because it was like, what in the hell, hell's going on? Like, what headlines is this? The next is that, and from very reputable news sources. So if I didn't take the time to go like, just let's read through it and wait to see what happens, you could make really, really decisions that affect everything. And I was sitting next to a CEO from a company that was in the defense space, and he, I don't even know the name of his company, so I can't spill anything about him. I don't know. And he was like, yeah, we're just watching because we have a couple $80 billion projects that we're trying to figure out. I'm thinking, a couple $80 billion projects that you're working on right now. And it's that type of thing and I, again, no context at all. So I want to be very clear. I don't know how many jobs is that? How many people is that?
Right,
what is the impact, positive or negative? And, I don't even know where they were. Like, we didn't get into that level of conversation. I'm not a talker on the plane. I'm actually the opposite.
Headphones on.
Yeah, I'm the opposite. So the fact that I think he may have overseen me typing something and was like, oh, what do you do? You're an AI? And I'm like, what? And I'm thinking to myself, like, what did you read? Like, and then we had a 3-minute conversation. But the point is that there's a lot of levers here. So yeah. We're just about at time. Any closing marks, Brad, before we go to Shaun?
No, that's glad to be part of the group, and thank you guys for allowing me to step in, and looking forward to continue contributing because cash matters, and the more we can spread the word, the better things are.
So Shaun,
I think it was good conversation. Thanks everybody for listening. I feel like this is why we need to do this more often, or else you get a brain dump of various pieces of information in over an hour. So we hope you enjoyed that. It was fun to do. It was like the dam broke of all of the things we were saving up for the past month. So anyway, no, it was great. Thanks for listening. We've got some good events coming up. We hope to see you guys either in Bangkok or later in the year in Miami here in the Americas. But yeah, that's it. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Please subscribe to the podcast. It's important for us. We see a lot of listeners and not as many subscribers. It takes a second to hit that button. And if you want to be a guest, reach out to us. We're not hard to find. You can definitely get us on LinkedIn, on the website. But please, if you want to jump on and talk about anything, and if you disagree with everything we said, we love for you to come on. We love it. We'd love to see you. So thank you. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to the Cash News Podcast. We hope you found this episode insightful. Don't forget to like and review us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter, and be sure to visit us at thecashnews.com to stay up to date with the latest on the world of cash. Thanks again for listening to the Cash News Podcast.